Good evening. I'm just reading some of the messages already, so I can see that we got quite a few people tuned in. Thank you very much. Questions and answers always seems to be quite a popular session, so I'm prepared to be absolutely blasted with questions. I've had quite a few in the lead up for tonight, and I can see a few already, so it should be fun. If you're watching live, then thank you for joining me. Pop your question in. Ideally, if you could put a Q to start with, and then I could make sure that I'm highlighting it as a question to come back to it. If you're watching on replay, then put your question in the comments and I will reply. So hopefully everyone will get the answers to the questions that they want to put across. Right, okay, let me just go through here and just pick out some of the questions. Right, right, evening Paul, evening Doug, evening Zaid, evening Kev, Miguel, Grant, Lauren. Right, let's put that in here. Nia, hi. Dan, good evening. Fred, good evening. Hello. Right. Okay. Okay, so questions. I've had a few fired at me beforehand, so I'll kick off with the ones that we'll put on the comment on the community post. But if you get any other questions, far away and I'll get to them as soon as I can. Right, first question is from Steve. Are the dynos more effective than road conditions you could achieve, and does it make any difference when mapping? No, and it's on purpose. The dyno is less effective than the road, and the reason why that's a good thing is you don't really want the cooling in the dyno cell to be better than what the real world is, because you'd end up having to make an awful lot of adjustments once you get out into the real world. There's always better airflow over the filters, over the engine, than what can be recreated with the dyno fans. The fans generally blow, depending on which dyno setup there is, but generally blow at sort of 50 miles an hour. So high speed stuff is getting less cooling in the dyno cell than it would be in the real world, which is good. It's the better way to do it. Another question from Steve. Do I notice any difference between an aftermarket air intake, a cone type in the engine bay, and one mounted outside the bay in the inner wing? In the real world, not an awful lot, depending on how much airflow. If you've got a really big turbo, the amount of air that's pushing through or sucking through, there's, it's bringing cold air in from the outside anyway, even through the slot in the bonnet, everywhere. Sucks small children through it. There's a huge amount of air that goes through there. The ones down in the inner wing tend to cause some problems, particularly in the weather that we're having at the moment, with huge great puddles everywhere, and they can suck in water, and that will hydrolock an engine, and water doesn't compress, so rods and lots of other bits bend, and it's not good. So in a dry climate, the inner wing is great, but in wet climates like the UK, then in the engine bay is fine. If you're doing lots of sort of traffic light Grand Prix, then ideally isolate the air filter so that it's only able to take air from outside. But most of the time, once you're driving, there is enough air going through there. Right, let's just keep up to date with what's going on here. Right. Bum, bum, bum. Right, another question there. Another question there. Blimey. It's going to be a busy session. Right, loads of questions. Thanks, guys. Right. Another question from beforehand. This is the first viewer from Venezuela. Gas in Venezuela is estimated at only 85 RON. My God. Is it okay to pour an octane booster every time I fill up the tank in your Hawk? Will it be a bad idea to do a VF48 swap at this time because of fuel? That must be a real challenge to tune for, particularly on a 2.5 engine, which I'm guessing is what you've got in your Hawkeye. To a degree, it'd be better on the VF48 than it would on the TD04 because running more boost will generate more heat on the TD04. So if you're running the same sort of boost, like a bar and a bit on the VF48, then you should be able to take out enough timing to make it usable and still drivable and still reasonably powerful. Obviously, you're going to lose a bit of power because of the fuel. That must be quite a challenge, mapping on 85. But octane booster would definitely help because that's the biggest challenge you got. I hope that helps. Right. Ruben down in sunny Oz. What components would you spec for an engine build for an EJ25 that is regularly street driven and competes in sprint and hill climb, running about 250 kilowatts of wheel? That, for anyone not in Australia, that's about 330 horsepower, I believe. Standard engine should cope with that. I'm guessing from your other comment that you've maybe had engine failures in the past, but that may be related to fuel starvation or fuel surge or oil surge, which I would probably concentrate on solving those two issues rather than over-speccing an engine and still having those issues in the background. I know you've had advice from a reputable builder there to have closed deck block, 40mm head studs, fire rings. I think that's a bit overkill for that sort of power. I think the thing that you need to solve is what's killing the engine. So if that's cooling, solve that. If it's oil surge, solve that. I was looking at the IAG and the Killer Bee sumps. They look really great. Not quite as good as a dry sump, but will definitely solve some issues. So I don't know whether you can give me some information, Ruben, on what sort of issues you've had before. And I think I would probably look to solve those rather than overspec an engine, because an expensive forged engine is going to hurt even more if that dies. Right, and on the subject of engines, what's your opinion, experience with the billet blocks, and how do they compare to a forged build on a closed deck EJ25? Right, the EJ25, the issue with the standard block is at the thinnest point, the liners are only about 5mm thick. So there isn't an awful lot of meat in the block. So they kind of wiggle around a bit. And because of the wiggling, they do head gaskets. and because they're only 5mm thick in the liners, they're prone to cracking when you put too much cylinder pressure in there, and that point tends to be at about 450 horsepower, UK horsepower. So the closed deck inserts, from my experience, they don't solve that liner issue. They if anything, they make it slightly worse, if I could be slightly controversial on that, because you got to put the closed deck insert on the top and then rehone the block, possibly for larger pistons. So if you're taking 0.5mm out of the liner wall, then you're actually making the liners even weaker. They look pretty, they look lovely, but I don't think they solve the problem. The billet blocks, I haven't tuned one, but they solve the problem with the liners being thick. They solve the problem with the meat in the actual block itself, stop it wiggling around. So I see no reason why they can't handle stupid amounts of power. They are massively expensive, and I'm very jealous of anyone that can actually afford to run one, but they are beautiful, and I think IAG do a great job with their engine builds. So I wouldn't have any hesitation in recommending their blocks. Right. Another question from Musuki Kordo-san. I'd love to know where you're from, sir, or madam. Hawkeye RA engine is one of the best of the new generation. It's one of the best of the EJ257 engines. The pistons are stronger in the RA block, the EJ257 RA block. Whether it completely solves the ringland issues, I'm not entirely sure. I don't think there's enough of them out in the real world to actually tell. But what was the second part of that? What could a run-of-the-mill WRX owner do, if anything, to get high revving and overall characteristics of one? Yeah, the high revving on the 2.5 is the rods. So upgrading the rods, and you can rev the standard crank to 8,500, but the standard rods aren't strong enough to do that. And once you can rev it, if you've got a turbo that's flowing enough air to actually make power up there, then yeah, it's worth doing. Right, let's go back to the comments, see what we got in here. Right, bum bum. Oh, let me just show this. Mark, right. 7 Subarus. Got a problem, sir. Very expensive. But ask away. I'm sure you'll have questions. Right. Okay, let's go back to some questions. Right, Mark, dishwasher for engine parts. Yeah, it works surprisingly well. The salt, which I presume is what you mean in there, does corrode things, so you have to, as soon as they're out and dry, get some oil on them, because otherwise they'll just rust. But the dishwasher does a great job of cleaning up K&N air filters, I know that. Okay, Miguel. EGT. What ECU are you running, Miguel? Are you running ECU Master or a different? Right, let's bring up another question. If you can let me know what ECU you're running, Miguel, that'd be good. Car overheating by spark plug terminal broken in half. I'd say no. I've not seen that. I'm not saying it couldn't happen, but I'm trying to understand why it would actually cause it to overheat. I think overheating tends to be either head gasket or thermostat, or a blocked radiator. But if it's a 2007, I think that would be unlikely. Thermostats, there was an issue with the Hawkeye thermostats. I had one fail on my Hawkeye, and it wasn't a head gasket issue. Right. Yeah, that was a thing, probably 10-15 years ago. Cryogenic cooling bar that you strapped onto the top mount intercooler, and it sprayed a very cold gas like nitrous, and worked well to cool it down briefly, like the intercooler spray, but one that actually works, because they don't work. Yes, nitrous is really expensive. I think Will, whose car was in that video, I think it cost him about £100 to fill up the bottle, and that was an £11. I think it was £11 or £18 bottle, so it's quite expensive. So doing that is an expensive way to do it. Front mount and solves the problem. Get rid of that one. Okay. Down the Mini-Man. Right. I've not had too many centre diffs fail, to be honest. The centre diff was knackered on my Hawkeye, and it would just, yeah, it would feel like it was wanting to overtake, like the back end of the car was feeling like it wanted to overtake me. Was quite interesting to drive. I'm not sure how else you'd tell. If you're suspecting something, then it may be a case of getting it off and just examining, see whether there's any issues in there. Right. Okay. It's confusing me, Mark, with the name coming up as Lynn. Decapped injectors work great on power. They flow like the right amounts. The problem with the decapped injectors is the cap actually creates a really nice spray pattern. So a 550 injector with the cap on the top has a nice funnel sort of spray pattern, so the fuel gets distributed nicely around the cylinder. When you take the cap off, it's kind of like when you put your thumb over the end of a hose pipe. It's a bit random as to where the jet goes, so it could be going over to one side or straight down. I've seen them when they've been just like a needle thread of fuel, so you get like a washed out bit on the top of the piston puddle in there, so it's super rich. You get a weird combustion. And the idle and cold start are particularly bad. Cruise and idle in particular are where you'd see an issue. On boost, it's there's fuel everywhere in there. So if you've got running issues that are sort of cold start, idle or cruise, and you've got decapped injectors, then put in some good quality top feed injectors in there and it'll solve those issues. Right. Yeah, I'm not sure about over where you are, Lauren. In this country, you can buy full gasket sets from ICP and other places, RCM. Do full gasket sets, full seal sets. You know, if you're taking the block arse apart or the taking the heads apart, then it will go through. You know, replace every seal. Normally have a few left over as well, which is quite handy. But yeah, OEM exhaust gaskets are great. They're probably the only ones to go for. But the other gaskets you can buy aftermarket ones, and they're fine. Obviously, there's lots of choice on head gaskets. Right. Okay, where are we up to on here? Da-da-da-da-dum. Right. Right. Does a leaner mixture produce more power? Right. Yes and no. There is a magic point where if you have too much fuel in there, then it actually loses power. But if you don't have enough fuel in there, then it will lose power as well, and cause other issues like holes in pistons and head gaskets and bad stuff. The air fuel ratio on a Subaru for that is kind of like 11.8, 12 to 1. Tends to be the most powerful, but it's a bit risky tuning for that sort of level, because if you get in a heat soak in an engine bay or fuel gets hot, then that leans it out, and as soon as it leans out, it's going to take it above that 12 mark where it's going to object. Tuning for a slightly safer air fuel ratio on normal fuel, you can make up a fair chunk of that missing power by adding extra ignition time in. But yeah, to a point it adds more power, but it's a tightrope, and I wouldn't recommend it personally. Right, where else are we on here? Yeah, there was a couple of you asked about decapped WRX injectors. Yeah, they're fine once you're on boost, flow perfectly. The WRX 420cc injectors, when you decap them, they go up to about between kind of 750 and 850 cc's. So if you have a set of 420cc injectors, if you decap them, or you take the mesh cap off the top, then you could have one that's at 750, one that's at 800, one's at 810, one's at 850. Bloody difficult to tune for that. So you need to get enough standard injectors, so when you decap them, you've got 4 that are 850, 4 that are 750, and do it that way. Because just taking the caps off and putting them in, you could have a big difference in the flow rates of each individual injector. Right. Yeah, the cylinder head, it's more the cams than the cylinder head. And then once you solve the cam issue, it's the valves. The head is pretty decent, but you know, a standard set of WRX blob eye, for example, cylinder heads on a car with a 600 horsepower turbo is gonna struggle to hit 500. That tends to be the issue, or the power limit. I missed the first part of that, Doug, but yeah, on the EJ257, yeah, supporting the side of the liners with dowels, or pinning as it's called, or as it's called here, kind of supports the liners further down the block, so can help stop the liners splitting. Bum bum. Right. Phil, is this a Hawkeye drive-by-wire car? Because there are issues that because it's using the drive-by-wire throttle, so you've got the like a requested torque graph, and around that sort of speed, you going between some very low requested torque figures to reasonably high. So it could be that any little bumps in the road are sort of jumping it up, and as a result the throttle's opening for very tiny movements in the accelerator pedal. You can tune that out. Right. Winner. Decent result. Okay, Miguel. Right, link G4. Yeah, what are you trying to see with the EGTs that needs to go through the ECU? I think I could think of an awful lot more things that would be more useful spending 400 euros on than a EGT module, to be honest. Boom, boom, boom. Right, so just trying to catch up here. Nope, wrong one. Hawkins DI 474 Cybex S6. Would it be beneficial to the car to fit a wideband? Yes. The wideband of the NTK L2H2 wideband that we can just plug straight into the Cybex controls the fueling everywhere. Sample rate is about 600 times a second, so it knows exactly what's going on, can add fuel if the environment changes. It's a very good idea, very good idea. Plus you can put in like some fail safes, so if it starts to run lean on boost, then the ECU will put it into limp mode, so it's good from that perspective. and it's dirt cheap on a Cyvex to do that, because you're just buying a sensor and plugging that straight into the ECU, rather than like with the Link where you have to go through a CAN module, which it works out about £450, so it's quite an expensive option. Right, another question. Sports Cat downpipe. I was having this conversation with a customer earlier on today. ProDrive Sports Cat is still the best. It's still the only one that realistically stands a really good chance of passing the MOT. Most of the others, after a year or 2 years, they're scrap. Whereas the ProDrive ones tend to keep going. How many miles? It's quite a job to take them out and send them off for flow checking. If you're worried about it, it's a lot easier to do that than it is spending a lot of money on new injectors. New injectors will probably stand you £500 or £600, whereas taking them out and getting them flow checked, a lot less than that. I don't know whether I could put any particular mileage on it. Probably more inclined to say if the car's been sat up for a while, then it's more inclined to have dirt in the fuel tank or issues with the fuel filter, and maybe that's got through. Yeah, probably not a mileage thing, but get them out and get them checked if you want. But if there's no running issues, then I would say I wouldn't bother. Have I missed some others? No worries, Mo. Okay, right. Right. Yeah, the EGT sensor is not really going to tell you detonation. You'll see exhaust gas temperature, and that's all you'll see. But you know, you can be high EGTs with running lean, and you could be high EGTs running rich. So I think it's something that probably can be more confusing than helpful, in my opinion. Wideband would be a better option. Right, Mark. Reading building engines, solid shims and buckets. The UK STIs are all solid one-piece buckets. The WRXs have the shims in. They're always a good thing. The shims can move. I've seen that happen. Right. The Cyvex have got a YouTube channel, and they've got some information videos on how to use various things. I will be covering Cyvex in the academy, but as far as like a basic how-to with the software, then their videos are probably the place to look at on that. But if you got a problem, just message me or give me a call, and I can try and talk you through. Right. What gauges do I recommend having? Oil pressure, oil temperature are really useful. If you watched the track day session last week, if you're in the UK and you're going on track, then an oil pressure gauge on the pillar is a really good option, because you're actually seeing that in the eye line when you're going around the corner. If it's in the center console, then because most tracks are clockwise in the UK, yeah, in the eye line is better. So oil pressure, definitely. Oil temperature helps. Apart from that, boost gauge, useful, but nothing else, in my opinion. Wideband, if you've got a wideband gauge in there, then that's useful for tuning. Right. Yeah, but Miguel, you need 4 EGT sensors to see it per cylinder. So detonation, the ECU is reading that information already from the knock sensor. So that's the place to take that information from, because it's tuned to the frequency that it will hear detonation at. If you're just taking a combined exhaust gas temperature sensor, I really don't think it's that helpful. Right, here we go. Andrew, hello. Cast headers versus stainless steel, heat retention for turbo spool. Heat retention doesn't tend to be the issue. Like the aftermarket ones, the stainless steel aftermarket ones, tend to be too big. So that slows down the airflow going through the turbo, and makes the car laggier than it ought to be, really. The standard headers, because Subaru spent quite a lot of time designing them, work amazingly. The only issue is the fact that where the flanges meet the head, there's a little bit of an offset. So if you can take those headers off, port them out with a whizzy wheel or a die grinder, and the same with all the gasket joins, just open them up a little bit, and they'll flow 600 horsepower easily. Beyond that, then yeah, stainless steel headers are great. Yeah, it will. Right. Okay, let's go back to this. Okay. Okay. Odd behaviour when the car is idling, currently closed loop, AFR swing lean. Right, so headers are standard or they're aftermarket, and where have you got the wideband or the narrowband sensor? Mikhail, I think, I don't like to like go all salesy on people, but if you join the academy side of things, I'll be able to get into real detail with that, on that subject with you. Send me data logs, see what's going on. I can give you a fresh set of eyes on it. But yeah, I can't really tell from this. What else we got in there? Yeah, I would need to see data logs. Have a look at the below the video here. There'll be a button that says join. Think about joining the academy. We do a weekly live session in the evenings on a Monday night, where I go through and data log, look at the data logs, review what's going on, just talk about like some real detail into how to tune on these sort of things. Right, let's get rid of that and go back to the comments. Any other questions in there? Aftermarket headers, front O2. Have you tried switching off the closed loop fueling, make it full-time open loop, see whether it's smooth then? Because if it is, it will just be a case of softening the effect of what the narrowband is doing. I think I'd still want to see logs of what's going on, and ideally to give you some good advice on it, and have a look at the map and just see whether there's anything in there that's causing the issues. Right. Needs a turbo. That's why. I have probably 2 or 3 people a year say, message me or email me and say, oh, I bought a non-turbo one. I want to convert it to a turbo. I'm going to do this, that, and the other. And it's just, it's an awful lot of work, an awful lot of money, when it would be far better off to just buy the turbo version. The NAs, right, the BRZ, fantastic car, but massively underpowered. Tuned a few of them and you can get another 10 horsepower for the amount of money that you spend in doing it, and it's just not worth it. Put a supercharger on it or a turbo on it and it becomes a whole different car. But the non-turbo ones, they're fantastic daily drivers. You know, we've got a up at the unit, we got no, and it's gone now, sold on, but it like done 250,000 miles on the original engine, never caused any grief. Subarus are incredibly reliable when you kind of leave them factory, and the NA stuff is incredibly reliable. But they just need more power. It's kind of like what Subaru are doing with the product range in the UK. We don't get any of the nice models, none of them. Like not even the BRZ. It's no Imprezas. It's just XV, Solterra, electric rubbish, and the Outback, and I think that's about it. Right, okay. No. Next question. I think in 17 years of tuning these, I've seen one standard recirculating dump valve fail, which is really weird because it kind of just recirculated air back through the turbo, and turbo sounded like it was doing an awful lot, but nothing was actually happening. aftermarket dump valves are an absolute nightmare because of where they sit with the top mount. They're under the scoop. You got oil vapors in the air, and you got dust and grit from the roads, and after a while that just forms a sort of cutting compound, and they just seize up or jam open. Car starts to stall coming up to junctions. You get idling issues. You get flat spots when you put your foot down. Dump valves, I really don't like them. If you want more noise, just blank it off. Save the £200 and put it to something that actually makes a performance difference, because the aftermarket ones never make a performance difference. It's just the noise, in my opinion. The people that are selling them will tell you otherwise. Awesome. Right. What are we at? Yeah. As Saeed says, yeah. The bigger the turbo, the nicer the noises you get out of it. If you watch some of my old time attack videos, you'll see or you'll hear the noises of my turbo. I never run a dump valve on a modified car. The Forester, because it is almost standard, still has the standard dump valve on there. I will not be putting an aftermarket one on. Good, and welcome. I'll hopefully see you next Monday. Right, okay. Jake Dozer tuning 05 STI with the Carb ATR software. Ooh, yeah, Cobb isn't something that we've had here in the UK, but if you can give me a bit of background as to, have you changed the injectors? If you haven't changed the injectors, then the tip-in you shouldn't need to be changing, and the same with the warm-up enrichment. You shouldn't need to be changing. The standard setup should work perfectly well. And as far as I'm aware, the Cobb maps, your Cobb tuner will have given you those, so they should work. But if you've got bigger injectors in there, then it's, if you scale the injectors and put in the latency for the injectors, then things like tip-ins are easier to do on the dyno than on the road. From my experience, because you can just hold it at a certain revs and do the tip in, and it will tell you whether it's going rich, in which case you need to back it off. If it's going lean, then add more. Sam, hi Sam. What power and boost would you push a stock EJ 207 to? Why are you turning it down? I've run a completely standard EJ 207 engine, short block engine. It had head studs and head gaskets, but standard heads. We ran 594 horsepower at 2.1 bar, and that outlasted the car. If the tune's right, then the tune's right. Whether you're making power with boost or timing, it's all cylinder pressure. So it's just it needs to be right. It depends on the turbo as to whether it will push that kind of boost without superheating the air. And if you've got a big enough turbo, then 1.85 is just kind of coming on to boost. On my on the time attack car, I ran 2.4 bar of boost on that, and you get some really nice noises from that. Okay, yeah, I think the key word there is currently. I've not been impressed with the Mamba turbos. GT30, it depends what the back end of it is. That might be what the wheels that they made it out of, but I don't think they are amazing turbos, to be honest. I'm sorry. But the 1.85 bar on that, I wouldn't have thought would be a problem on a 2 litre. If it was a 2.5, then yeah, maybe 1.65. No, you do not need a remap to blank off the dump valve. If you think about it, when it's on boost, the dump valve should be shut anyway, so there'll be no difference in the fueling, be no difference to the air going through. The only time that there will be any difference is when you let off the throttle. If you blank off the dump valve, then that air does go back through the turbo, creates the noise, and flows backwards over the MAF sensor. The MAF sensors don't tend to work in reverse, so it gets a bit of a weird hiccup sometimes. So if you're running on a MAF based ECU, then it can cause a little bit of a hesitation, but try it, see whether you can feel it. If you can't, then yeah, happy days, go for it. But it does not need a map change. How the heck do you map for that? Right, Mo. I've been doing a fair bit of research on these. The IAG one is very good. The only difference between the air oil separator and a catch can is the fact that you're using a vacuum source on the air oil separator to actually pull the air out of the heads and the block, and then that catches the oil vapor and feeds it back into the engine. A good catch can would do similar, but it's just not vacuum drawn. But if you have a catch can and drain that back to like a banjo bolt on the side of the sump, then it works just as well. On my last Forester, I had a monster can with the head of the breather pipes going into monster can. Worked great. What was I going to say on catch cans? If you're the placement of the catch can, if you're running a catch can, is important if you're draining it back to the sump, because in the UK, right-hand drive cars, on the passenger side chassis leg was a good place for the catch can, and having it drain back to the sump, great idea. Except on the Hawkeye sump, where the drain plug is on that side, on heavy right-hand cornering, which is most of the time on track, oil goes up the drain pipe and fills the catch can from the bottom. Not a good idea. So try and think about if you're doing that drain back to the sump, as to where the pipes will go. But the IAG stuff is very good. It is expensive though, Christ. Alright, nothing stock on fuel, FP black. Yeah, the ID 1300 injectors, the latency on those is very similar to standard Subaru injectors. I was doing a car today with IG 1300s. If you take, let's say you're going from 550s to ID 1300s. So whatever that is, off the top of my head, like 40% of what the new injectors are. So if you put the same ratio on the tip-in values and the warm-up enrichments, it should get you close. Right, so yeah, if it's not detting, then yeah, send it. James WX misfire. Can you give me a bit more information on that? Right, James Nash. Yeah, that's a different version of that, but yeah, it's a good piece of kit. It's a lot of money, but it is a good piece of kit. For track use, definitely. For road use, still not sure. Right. Yeah, the monster can works fine. It just used to get crushed up occasionally, so I'd throw it away and use a new one. Unfortunately for me, I love drinking and stuff. Oh, Stu. Yeah, saw the comment. Yeah, we'll definitely do a video on that. Good point. Right. Exactly. Yeah, you don't want oil in the vapor going into the engine because it lowers the octane. Right, USA, Texas. God, we're getting loads of come to Texas adverts on the telly at the moment. They must want lots of people there. Right, boost level for coldness grade of plugs. Yeah, boost level. Yeah. I'm not sure I'd do it on boost level, to be honest. But for most modified cars, unless you're going above, I don't know, 550, then like grade 7 plugs would be fine. If you're less than 330, then maybe grade 6 would be fine. No, you don't want visitors. No, I think you get enough coming up across the border, don't you? I think. All right. No, there isn't really an easy way. It's a, yeah. If adding fuel gets rid of the misfire, then it's a cause. If adding fuel makes no difference, then what you're seeing is effect of something else. Definitely not. Right. Okay, wideband seems to have a lag. Yeah, I think going back to the data logs there, if we get rid of the lean bit, then that misfire I think will go. Yeah, I see the pictures. I see the pictures. Right, are we finished with the questions? Because we are kind of at the end of the session. Have I missed anyone? If I've missed your question, please pop it in the comments below the video. I can't see any that I've missed at the moment. But if you get an idea of something you want answered or attempt to answer, I haven't got the answers for everything. Kaylin, how are you with wiring wizardry? Yeah, this wiring, yeah, no problem. Depends what kind of wiring, household wiring, but yeah, car wiring, electronics, yeah, no problem. Okay, I think we're probably there. As I say, if you've got any questions, pop them in the comments. I will answer them or try and answer them. But thank you very much for tuning in, and I will see you next week. If you've got any ideas as to anything particular that you want me to cover, then again, pop it in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video.